I cut ties with my family after my golden sister tried to seduce to my boyfriend and my entitled. My name is Ramona, and I'm 28 years old. Family used to be everything to me until the day my sister crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Growing up in her shadow was hard enough, but when she tried to seduce my boyfriend and my parents took her side, I knew I had to walk away. The betrayal was devastating, but nothing prepared me for what came years later. Naked pictures sent to my husband as a final confession before her wedding. If you're watching this from someone who's had to make the heartbreaking choice to protect yourself from toxic family members, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and I'll share how my story of betrayal led to unexpected healing. I grew up in a spacious colonial house in suburban Boston, the kind with perfectly trimmed hedges and a white picket fence that hid what was really going on inside. From the beginning, it was clear that my sister Natalie, just 2 years younger than me, was the golden child. She had this natural charm that my parents were completely captivated by, while I was often overlooked or criticized. The difference in how we were treated was obvious in so many ways. Christmas mornings told the whole story. Natalie's pile of gifts always towered over mine. Her requests were granted immediately, while mine were met with, "We'll see," or "maybe next time." When she misbehaved, my parents would laugh it off as Natalie being Natalie. But when I made the smallest mistake, I was lectured about responsibility and disappointment. One memory stands out painfully clear. My 10th birthday party was scheduled months in advance, but when Natalie suddenly had a dance recital the same day, my parents didn't hesitate to reschedule my celebration. "Your friends won't mind," my mother said dismissively. "This recital is important for your sister's confidence." I sat in the audience watching Natalie twirl in her tutu instead of blowing out candles with my friends. The rescheduled party a week later felt like an afterthought. In 6th grade, I spent weeks perfecting my science fair project on water purification. I won first place, and I couldn't wait to share the news with my parents. When I got home clutching my blue ribbon, they barely looked up from fawning over Natalie's participation ribbon from the same fair. "That's nice, honey," my father said before turning back to Natalie. "Now tell us more about your volcano. It sounds so creative." The incidents piled up year after year. Natalie would regularly take my things without asking: clothes, jewelry, school supplies. And when I complained, my mother would say, "Don't be so selfish, Ramona. Sharing is caring." Once, Natalie borrowed my favorite sweater without permission and returned it with a large stain. When I got upset, my father snapped, "It's just a sweater. Don't make such a big deal out of everything." I learned that the only way to get any positive attention was through achievements, so I threw myself into academics. I joined every club, took advanced classes, and stayed up late studying. Even then, my parents found ways to minimize my accomplishments. "School comes easier to you," they'd say, or "You're naturally book smart." Meanwhile, Natalie's C- would earn her ice cream because she tried her best. My mother, Margaret, was especially critical of my appearance compared to Natalie's. "You could be pretty too if you put in some effort," she'd say while Natalie preened beside her. "Your sister understands the importance of making a good impression." No matter what I wore or how I styled my hair, it was never quite right in my mother's eyes. My father, Robert, wasn't much better. He was a successful businessman who valued achievement, yet somehow my academic successes never impressed him. When I brought home straight A's, he'd glance at the report card and say, "That's expected." But when Natalie managed to pull her grades up from D's to C's, he'd take the whole family out to celebrate her tremendous improvement. The teenage years made everything worse. While other girls were experimenting with makeup and talking about boys, I retreated further into books and future plans. My bedroom became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the constant comparison and criticism. I covered my walls with college pennants and motivational quotes reminders that someday I would build a life beyond the shadow of my sister. Dating was another battlefield entirely. The few times I brought boys home, my parents interrogated them like criminals, questioning their intentions and making them uncomfortable. Natalie, however, could bring home anyone, and my parents would welcome them with open arms, offering snacks and making conversation. "Your sister knows how to pick nice boys," my mother would comment afterward, implying that my judgment was somehow flawed. By senior year of high school, I had a clear escape plan. I applied to colleges far from home and focused on scholarship opportunities. Meanwhile, Natalie was barely passing her classes, spending more time at parties than studying. When graduation came, I walked across the stage as valedictorian. My speech thanked supportive teachers and friends. I couldn't bring myself to include my parents, who sat in the audience looking bored until Natalie's name was called. The final straw that summer was when my parents bought Natalie a brand new car as a graduation gift. "She tried so hard," my mother explained. "We want to reward her effort." I had been working part-time jobs since sophomore year to save for my own car, a used Honda with fading paint and over 100,000 miles on the odometer. When I pointed out the unfairness, my father said, "Life isn't fair, Ramona. You should know that by now." Leaving for college was like taking my first real breath. I'd earned a full scholarship to a university 300 miles away from home, and that distance felt like the greatest gift. The day my parents dropped me off at my dorm, I watched their car disappear down the campus road and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time, I could just be Ramona, not Natalie's less interesting sister. My dorm room was tiny, but it was mine. I decorated it with bright colors and inspirational quotes, small touches that made it feel like a fresh start. No more walking on eggshells, no more constant comparisons. I could reinvent myself here, where no one knew about my golden child sister or my critical parents. I threw myself into business management classes with a passion that surprised even me. Without the cloud of family drama hanging over me, I discovered I had a natural talent for marketing strategy and consumer psychology. Professors began to notice my work, inviting me to special seminars and introducing me to industry contacts. Each small success felt magnified because it was mine alone. No one was waiting to dismiss it or compare it to someone else's. My roommate Jessica became the first person to see my family dynamic clearly. During fall break, when other students were heading home, I made excuses to stay on campus. "You never talk about your family," she observed one night as we shared pizza in our room. When I finally opened up about Natalie and my parents, Jessica looked shocked. "That's not normal, Ramona. That's toxic favoritism." Her validation was like cool water on a burn I'd been ignoring for years. The contrast between campus life and home visits became impossible to ignore. At school, I was confident, valued, surrounded by friends who appreciated my humor and intelligence. But the moment I walked through my parents' front door for holidays, I shrank back into the insecure, overlooked daughter. Each visit home was an exercise in stress management, counting down the hours until I could leave biting my tongue when Natalie monopolized conversations, forcing smiles, when my parents made their usual cutting remarks. Thanksgiving of sophomore year was particularly revealing. I just secured a competitive internship for the following summer, and I was excited to share the news. At dinner, I waited for a pause in conversation and announced it proudly. My mother's response: "That's nice, dear. Did you hear about Natalie's new boyfriend? He's pre-law at state." The conversation immediately pivoted to Natalie's dating life, while my achievement evaporated like steam. By junior year, I was spending most holidays with Jessica's family, or staying on campus for study reasons. My parents rarely questioned my absence, which hurt in a new way, but also confirmed I was making the right choice. Meanwhile, according to occasional texts from my mother, Natalie was flunking out of her local college, changing majors for the third time, and partying too much. Yet somehow, this was all framed as Natalie finding herself, rather than failing. During this time, I started seeing a campus therapist who helped me understand the patterns in my family. "What you're describing is classic golden child scapegoat dynamics," she explained. "It's not about you. It's a dysfunction in the family system." Those sessions became crucial to my healing, teaching me that I wasn't imagining the unequal treatment and that I deserved better. My internship the summer after junior year turned into a networking goldmine. I worked 60-hour weeks for a national marketing firm, impressing my supervisors enough that they connected me with contacts across the industry. By the time senior year rolled around, I had 3 job offers lined up for after graduation, all in cities far from Boston. Graduation day arrived with a sense of triumph. My parents and Natalie attended looking somewhat out of place among the families who were openly weeping with pride. When I received my diploma with highest honors, there was a brief moment when I thought I saw genuine pride in my father's eyes, but it was quickly replaced with his usual reserve. At the post-ceremony gathering, my mother spent most of the time telling my professors about Natalie's creative spirit and how she was too unique for traditional education. I accepted a position at a marketing firm in Chicago, nearly 1,000 miles from Boston. When I told my parents, my father frowned. Chicago. That's so far. What if something happens and we need you? It was the first time he'd ever implied that they might need me for anything, and it almost made me reconsider. Almost. My mother was more direct. I don't understand why you need to go so far. There are plenty of jobs in Boston. What she meant was, who will be our responsible daughter, who handles emergencies while we focus on Natalie, who will be the counterweight to your sister's chaos? But I had made up my mind. Years of therapy had helped me see that distance wasn't just a preference. It was necessary for my mental health. The day I drove my packed Honda out of Boston, I felt both terrified and exhilarated. I was 22 years old, and for the first time I was choosing myself. Chicago welcomed me with its bustling energy and endless possibilities. My apartment was a studio in a converted warehouse, small but stylish with exposed brick walls and tall windows that let in streams of morning light. Every piece of furniture, every decoration was chosen by me for me. There were no childhood memories here, no comparisons lurking in the corners. My job at the marketing firm exceeded expectations. I started as an account coordinator, but quickly worked my way up to junior executive within 18 months. My boss, a straight-talking woman named Vivian, became the mentor I'd always craved. "You have good instincts," she told me during my first performance review. "And you work twice as hard as anyone else. Just make sure you're doing it for yourself, not to prove something to someone else." Her words hit home. Much of my drive had been fueled by a desire to prove my worth to parents who never seemed to notice. Now I was learning to achieve for my own satisfaction, and it was liberating. I met Daniel at an industry conference in the spring of my second year in Chicago. He was presenting a panel on architectural design and marketing partnerships. Tall, with thoughtful brown eyes and a quiet confidence that drew me in immediately. During the networking mixer afterward, we ended up in the same conversation group, and I was struck by how attentively he listened to everyone's input, including mine. "Architecture is really just applied psychology," he said when I asked about his work. "Understanding how people move through spaces, what makes them feel comfortable or inspired." Something about his perspective resonated with me deeply. We exchanged business cards, and to my surprise, he emailed the next morning asking if I'd like to meet for coffee to discuss potential collaborations between our firms. Coffee led to dinner, which led to long walks along Lake Michigan, discussing everything from childhood dreams to favorite books. Daniel had grown up in Minnesota in a close-knit family. His stories about supportive parents and holiday traditions both warmed and wounded me, highlighting everything my own family wasn't. "They sound wonderful," I said after he described his mother's tradition of making each child a special birthday meal of their choosing. "They're not perfect," he replied, "but they're consistent. You always know where you stand." That simple statement brought tears to my eyes, though I tried to hide them. As our relationship deepened, Daniel became curious about my family. I'd been vague, offering only minimal details. 6 months into dating, he gently pressed the issue. "You've met my parents twice now, but you never talk about yours. Are they still in Boston?" That night, I finally opened up about growing up in Natalie's shadow. Daniel listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, he took my hands in his. "Ramona, you deserved better than that. Family should be where you feel most valued, not least." After a year of dating, I finally agreed to bring Daniel to Boston to meet my family. The visit was as uncomfortable as I'd feared. From the moment we arrived, my mother fussed over whether Natalie would approve of the dinner she'd prepared, barely acknowledging the boyfriend I'd brought home. My father spent the first hour questioning Daniel about his career prospects, in a tone that bordered on hostile. Natalie arrived last, making an entrance in a dress that seemed more appropriate for a nightclub than a family dinner. Her eyes lit up when she saw Daniel, and something in her expression made my stomach clench. Throughout dinner, she directed most of her conversation toward him, laughing too loudly at his polite jokes, touching his arm whenever possible. Daniel, she purred over dessert. What made you fall for my serious big sister? You seem much too fun for her usual type. The question hung awkwardly in the air. Daniel, to his credit, didn't miss a beat. Actually, Ramona has the best sense of humor. Just yesterday, she had the whole office laughing with her impression of our client. He smiled at me warmly. But what really attracted me was her intelligence and kindness. I've never met anyone who thinks the way she does. My mother looked surprised, as if she couldn't quite believe someone would describe me that way. My father changed the subject. Natalie's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. That night in our hotel room, Daniel was uncharacteristically quiet. They really don't see you, he finally said. The way they treat you versus your sister. It's so obvious, but they don't even try to hide it. Now you understand why Chicago is good for me, I replied. He pulled me close. Your family doesn't define you, Ramona. You've built an amazing life despite them not because of them. Those words became a lifeline in the months that followed. Daniel and I grew closer, weathering work stress, a health scare when he had appendicitis, and the everyday challenges of building a relationship. After another year, we decided to move in together, finding a 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Chicago with a view of the river. We created our own traditions, Sunday morning pancakes, monthly culture nights, where we would explore a new neighborhood holiday decorations that combined his family heirlooms with items we chose together. Visits to my family became increasingly rare and brief, while trips to Minnesota to see Daniel's parents were relaxed and enjoyable. When we did visit Boston, the contrast between how our families functioned became painfully clear. During one Thanksgiving, my mother spent the entire meal talking about Natalie's latest drama. She'd lost another job and broken up with another boyfriend, while barely asking about my recent promotion. Daniel's discomfort was visible, and he squeezed my hand under the table in silent support. Later, when we were preparing for bed in the guest room, he said quietly, I don't think they realize what they're missing by not really knowing you. After 2 years together, Daniel proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Geneva. The ring had belonged to his grandmother, a vintage emerald that his mother had kept for the person who would truly appreciate its history. The fact that his family had embraced me so completely, even entrusting me with a family heirloom, moved me to tears. As we began discussing wedding plans, anxiety crept in. A wedding meant family, and family meant navigating the complicated dynamics I'd worked so hard to escape. Daniel suggested we elope, but something in me still yearned for the traditional celebration, perhaps a lingering hope that such a significant event might finally make my parents see me differently. Let's have an engagement party in Boston, I suggested one evening. Something small with both families, a test run in a way. Daniel looked concerned. Are you sure we could have it here in Chicago? I want to give them a chance, I said. Maybe things will be different now. The irony of still seeking their approval wasn't lost on me. But wedding planning stirred up complicated emotions, making me nostalgic for the family relationships I wished I had, rather than the ones that actually existed. Little did I know that this decision would lead to the final breaking point with my family. The engagement party was scheduled for a Saturday evening in early June at a boutique hotel in downtown Boston. I spent weeks coordinating details from Chicago, selecting a menu that would please everyone, creating a guest list that balanced family and friends, choosing decorations that reflected our style, without being too trendy for my traditional parents. Daniel and I flew in Friday morning, planning to stay at my parents' house the night before the party. As we carried our luggage up the familiar front steps, I gave myself a pep talk. Just 2 days, I whispered to Daniel. We can handle anything for 2 days. My mother greeted us with her usual distracted air, kissing my cheek lightly, before turning her full attention to Daniel. You look tired from your flight. Can I get you something to drink? I stood awkwardly with my bag while Daniel politely declined. My father emerged from his study, shaking Daniel's hand firmly before giving me a brief nod. Natalie will be here for dinner, he announced. She's very excited about the party tomorrow. The afternoon passed in a blur of last-minute party details and forced small talk. When Natalie finally arrived for dinner, she made her usual dramatic entrance, 20 minutes late, full of excuses about traffic and a work crisis. She wore a tight red dress that seemed wildly inappropriate for a family dinner, and immediately enveloped Daniel in a perfume-soaked hug that lasted several seconds too long. "Look at my big sister finally getting married," she exclaimed, giving me a much briefer embrace. "I was beginning to think you'd be single forever." Throughout dinner, Natalie dominated the conversation, interrupting whenever I tried to speak and repeatedly touching Daniel's arm for emphasis when making her points. She asked detailed questions about our wedding plans, then suggested alternatives to every idea I mentioned. "You're not really thinking of that color scheme, are you, with your complexion? Or, that venue sounds so boring. You should consider something more unique like Daniel deserves." My parents nodded along with her suggestions, as if she were the authority on weddings, despite having never been engaged herself. By dessert, I had retreated into near silence, feeling the familiar shrinking sensation that always happened around my family. Daniel tried several times to bring me back into the conversation, but Natalie expertly redirected each time. After dinner, I developed a pounding headache, a combination of stress travel fatigue and the 2 glasses of wine I'd consumed to cope with the tension. "I think I need to lie down," I told Daniel. "Would you mind if I turned in early?" "Of course not," he said, concern evident in his eyes. "I'll be up soon." My mother frowned. "It's only 8:30, Ramona. Natalie was hoping we could all play cards or something. You always did go to bed early. Remember how she used to call you Grandma in high school?" She and Natalie exchanged amused glances. "I have a migraine," I said firmly. "And we have a big day tomorrow. I need to rest." I took some pain medication and fell into a restless sleep in my old bedroom, which my mother had long since converted into a home office with just a futon for guests. Photographs of Natalie still adorned the walls, dance recitals, graduation beach vacations, while evidence of my existence had been minimized to a single family photo where I stood awkwardly at the edge of the frame. I woke with a start at 2:13 a.m., the migraine dulled but still present. Reaching over, I realized Daniel wasn't beside me. The bathroom across the hall was dark, so I slipped out of bed to look for him, thinking maybe he couldn't sleep and had gone downstairs for water. The upstairs hallway was quiet. I glanced into Natalie's room as I passed, and was surprised to see her bed empty as well. A sense of unease crept over me as I made my way downstairs, careful to avoid the creaky third step that had always announced my teenage attempts at sneaking out. Light spilled from the kitchen into the darkened hallway. As I approached, I heard low voices. Natalie's musical laugh followed by Daniel's deeper tone, though I couldn't make out the words. I paused just outside the doorway, not wanting to interrupt if they were having an innocent conversation. That's when I heard Natalie's voice clearly. "Come on, Daniel. Ramona's asleep. She never has to know." Her voice had that playful, seductive quality I'd heard her use on countless men before. "Don't you want to find out what you're missing? I've always been the fun sister." I froze, blood rushing in my ears. Part of me wanted to burst in immediately, but some instinct held me back, needing to hear Daniel's response. "Natalie, stop." Daniel's voice was firm with an edge I rarely heard. "I love Ramona. I would never betray her, especially not with her sister. This is completely inappropriate." "Please," Natalie scoffed. "You can't tell me you're satisfied with her. She's so uptight, so boring. You know she's always been jealous of me. Taking you would just be too easy." "You need to stop right now," Daniel said, his tone hardening further. "The only person I feel sorry for in this situation is you. Ramona is an incredible woman who deserves better than this family has given her. I'm going to bed." I backed away quickly as I heard chair legs scrape against the floor, ducking into the living room, as Daniel exited the kitchen and headed upstairs. I waited until his footsteps faded before stepping into the kitchen doorway. Natalie stood leaning against the counter, sipping from a glass of wine. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Eavesdropping, sis? Always the wallflower, watching from the sidelines." "I heard everything," I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. "How could you do that? He's my fiancé. We're celebrating our engagement tomorrow." Natalie shrugged, setting down her glass. just testing his loyalty. You should be thanking me. Besides, it's not like it would be the first time I took something of yours. The casual cruelty in her words staggered me. What are you talking about? Oh, come on, she laughed. Jason Miller, your prom date senior year. He called me the week after you guys broke up. And Mark from your freshman year of college. We hooked up every time you brought him home for breaks. She examined her manicure nonchalantly. It was almost too easy. They all said the same thing, that you were nice, but I was exciting. The room seemed to tilt as years of suspicions crystallized into confirmation. You deliberately went after my boyfriends. Why would you do that? Because I could, she said simply. Because you always acted so superior with your perfect grades and responsible behavior. You actually thought you deserved to be happy. Her smile was brittle. The look on your face right now. That's why. You're pathetic, Ramona. Always have been. I heard movement on the stairs and turned to see my parents in their robes drawn by our raised voices. What's going on down here? My father demanded. It's the middle of the night. Words poured out of me, years of suppressed hurt finally finding voice. Natalie just tried to seduce Daniel. She waited until I was asleep and propositioned him in the kitchen. She's been deliberately going after my boyfriends for years. I expected shock outrage on my behalf. Instead, my mother sighed heavily. Ramona, you're overreacting. I'm sure Natalie was just being friendly. Friendly, I echoed in disbelief. She explicitly propositioned my fiancé, I heard her. My father frowned. Keep your voice down, you're being hysterical. Natalie wouldn't do something like that. I heard her with my own ears. My voice was rising despite my best efforts. She admitted to going after my previous boyfriends too. Natalie put on an innocent expression. Daddy, she's twisting everything. Daniel and I were just talking. He came downstairs for water, and I was having a midnight snack. Ramona's always been jealous of any attention I get. That's a lie. I was nearly shouting now, tears of frustration building. Daniel rejected her completely. Ask him. My mother touched my father's arm. Robert, this is exactly like that time in high school, when she accused Natalie of stealing her research paper. Ramona always needs to create drama. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious right now? Your daughter just tried to sleep with my fiancé the night before our engagement party, and you're defending her. My father's face hardened. I think Daniel probably encouraged her. Men always do. You know how charming your sister can be. That was the moment something broke inside me. The final thread of hope that my parents might ever see me, might ever take my side. 28 years of being gaslit, dismissed, and devalued crashed over me like a tidal wave. No, I said, my voice suddenly calm. No more, I'm done. Daniel appeared at the bottom of the stairs, obviously drawn by the commotion. His expression shifted from confusion to concern as he took in my tears and the tableau of my family. Ramona, what's happening? We're leaving, I said, turning to him. Now, tonight. I'll explain in the car. Don't be ridiculous, my mother snapped. It's 3 a.m. Where will you go? Anywhere but here. I was already heading for the stairs to get our luggage. My father's voice turned threatening. If you leave like this, if you ruin this party tomorrow over some imagined slight, don't bother coming back. I'm tired of your jealousy and accusations. I paused on the stairs, looking back at the three of them. My mother's disapproving frown, my father's angry glare, Natalie's smug smile. This was my family, the people who should have loved me most in the world, yet I felt nothing but relief at the thought of walking away. Goodbye, I said simply, and continued up the stairs. Daniel followed, his expression grave. What happened? He whispered, as we quickly packed our things. I heard everything in the kitchen, I told him. Thank you for shutting her down. They're defending her, of course. They always do. He shook his head, looking disgusted. We don't have to stay here. We can go to a hotel. 15 minutes later, we were loading our bags into the rental car as my parents stood in the doorway. You're making a scene over nothing, my mother called out. You'll regret this tomorrow. But as we drove away into the dark Boston night, the only thing I felt was the lifting of a weight I'd carried my entire life. Tears streamed down my face, not for what I was losing, but for what I should have had and never did. The drive to the hotel in downtown Boston passed in a blur of tears and fragmented explanations. Daniel listened silently as I poured out decades of hurt, his hands steady on the wheel, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand in support. By the time we checked into an overpriced room at 4 a.m., I felt hollowed out, but strangely calm. "We need to cancel the party," I said, as we sat on the edge of the hotel bed. "I can't face them tomorrow. I can't pretend everything is normal." Daniel nodded. "I'll handle it first thing in the morning. We can send an email to the guests and deal with the venue." Sleep came in fitful bursts, and I woke to find Daniel already on the phone with the hotel where the party was supposed to take place. To their credit, they were understanding about the last-minute cancellation, though we forfeited our deposit. Daniel methodically worked through the list of tasks, notifying guests, canceling the catering, arranging for our early flight back to Chicago the next day. My phone began buzzing with messages shortly after 9 a.m. I finally looked at it around noon, bracing myself for the onslaught. From my mother: "You're embarrassing yourself and this family. Call me when you're ready to apologize for your behavior." From my father: "Your mother is very upset. This childish tantrum needs to stop immediately." From Natalie: "Wow, dramatic much. Sorry you're so insecure about your relationship, not my fault." And then the extended family members started weighing in, obviously having heard only my parents' version of events. Aunt Linda: "Your poor parents are devastated. Whatever the problem is, family comes first." Cousin Steve: "Heard you had some kind of meltdown, not cool to cancel on everyone last minute." I turned off my phone, unable to bear the gaslighting and blame shifting. Daniel's parents called too concerned after receiving the cancellation notice. When Daniel explained the situation, their response was immediate and supportive. "Come stay with us for a few days," his mother offered. "You both need some space to process this." We changed our flights to head to Minnesota instead of Chicago, and the 4 days we spent with Daniel's family became a healing balm. His mother made no demands, asked no probing questions, simply provided a safe space with home-cooked meals and genuine affection. His father offered quiet solidarity, sharing his newspaper in the mornings and pouring an extra glass of scotch for Daniel in the evenings. On our last night there, his mother sat beside me on the porch swing. "Family should be a soft place to land," she said gently. "Not everyone gets that by birth. Sometimes we have to build it for ourselves." Back in Chicago, I began intensive therapy sessions to work through the family trauma that the weekend had brought to the surface. My therapist helped me understand that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for my mental health and future happiness. "What do you want your relationship with your family to look like going forward?" she asked during one session. After careful consideration, I decided to try one more time to make my parents understand. I wrote a long, thoughtful letter, explaining how their favoritism had affected me throughout my life, how Natalie's behavior had crossed unacceptable boundaries, and what I would need to maintain any kind of relationship with them going forward. Primarily, an acknowledgement of these patterns and a commitment to change. The response came 2 weeks later, a brief note in my mother's handwriting. "We're sorry you feel this way, but we've always treated both our daughters equally. Natalie says you've misunderstood her intentions completely. When you're ready to move past these accusations and jealousy, we'll welcome you back. Until then, please don't contact us with more drama. It's breaking your father's heart." There was no acknowledgement, no reflection, not even a hint of willingness to consider my perspective. My therapist wasn't surprised. "Sometimes the healthiest thing is to accept that they may never change," she said. "Your choice now is whether to continue engaging in this dynamic or to protect yourself by stepping away." The decision once made brought both grief and relief. I blocked their phone numbers and social media accounts. I set up email filters to send their messages to a separate folder I could check when I felt emotionally strong enough. I sent a final message explaining that I needed space and would not be in contact for the foreseeable future. The flying monkeys came next, extended family members and old family friends calling to pressure me into reconciliation. They're still your parents, they would insist. Family is family. I became skilled at ending these conversations quickly and firmly. Natalie sent one message that particularly stung. I'm sorry you're so sensitive about everything. Some sisters can take a joke. Guess you never could. The months that followed were a strange mix of mourning and liberation. I grieved for the family relationships I had wanted, but never had. Some days a song or smell would trigger memories of happier moments. Christmas mornings before the favoritism became so obvious, a rare compliment from my father, my mother teaching me to bake cookies, and the loss would feel acute. Other days I felt lighter than I had in years, free from the constant effort of seeking approval that would never come. Daniel supported me completely, never pushing me to reconcile for the sake of appearances or tradition. We planned our wedding for the following spring, a small intimate ceremony in a Chicago botanical garden, with just close friends and Daniel's family in attendance. His parents stepped into the void left by mine, helping with wedding details and treating me like the daughter they had always wanted. His mother went dress shopping with me, tearing up when I found the one. His father offered to walk me down the aisle, an invitation that brought me to tears. You don't have to, I insisted. I can walk alone. I know you can, he said kindly. You've proven how strong you are, but sometimes it's nice not to have to. The wedding day itself was beautiful in its simplicity and authenticity. Every person present truly wished us well, truly saw us for who we were. As I spoke my vows to Daniel, promising to create with him the family we both deserved, I felt the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. The absence of my blood relatives was a dull ache beneath the joy, but not a regret. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard news about them. My parents had remodeled their kitchen. My father was considering retirement. And Natalie was dating a series of men still living at home between breakups, still the center of my parents' world. I didn't miss the drama, but sometimes I missed the possibility of what could have been. The family dinners where everyone was valued equally, the sister who might have been my best friend instead of my rival, the parents who might have taken pride in my accomplishments. But as my therapist reminded me, you can miss the family you wished you had without returning to the family that hurt you. 3 years passed in relative peace. Daniel and I settled into the comfortable rhythms of married life, both advancing in our careers. I was promoted to senior marketing executive, while Daniel's architectural firm made him partner. We bought a townhouse in a neighborhood we loved, adopted a golden retriever named Cooper, and began tentatively discussing starting a family of our own. The estrangement from my family became our new normal. Holidays were spent either with Daniel's family in Minnesota or creating our own traditions at home. Sometimes friends would ask about my parents, and I developed a brief neutral response that discouraged further questions. We're not in contact currently. It's complicated, but it's healthier this way. Then on an ordinary Tuesday in April, I received an unexpected email from my cousin Lisa, one of the few extended family members who had always been kind to me. Hi Ramona, I thought you might want to know that Natalie is engaged. Wedding is set for June 15th at the country club. I understand why you wouldn't attend, but felt you should know. Hope you're well, Lisa. The news hit me with surprising force. I sat staring at my computer screen, unsure how to feel. Natalie getting married. The sister who had tried to seduce my fiancé was now planning her own wedding. According to Lisa's brief note, Natalie had been dating her fiancé, a wealthy investment banker named Richard, for just 6 months before he proposed. That evening, I shared the news with Daniel as we walked Cooper along the riverfront. How do you feel about it? He asked carefully. Conflicted, I admitted. Part of me doesn't care. Part of me is hurt they didn't even try to tell me themselves. And part of me wonders if I should try to extend an olive branch. It's been 3 years. After much discussion and a session with my therapist, I decided to send a simple congratulatory card to Natalie at our parents' address. No long letter, no reopening of old wounds, just a brief message acknowledging her milestone and wishing her happiness. I didn't include our return address or any contact information. It was a gesture, nothing more. Weeks passed with no response, which wasn't surprising. I hadn't expected one, though. Some small part of me had hoped that time and major life changes might have softened the family dynamics. By early June, I had put the matter out of my mind, focused instead on our plans to start trying for a baby after my upcoming 31st birthday. Then 1 week before Natalie's wedding date, everything exploded again. Daniel and I were having dinner at home when his phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it, then froze, his expression shifting from confusion to disgust. He put the phone face down on the table. "What is it?" I asked, immediately concerned. "It's—" He hesitated. "It's from Natalie." My stomach dropped. What does she want? Daniel ran a hand through his hair, looking deeply uncomfortable. "You should see for yourself, but it's not good." He handed me his phone. The text message showed a preview image, clearly a nude photograph, with text beneath it. "Last chance before I'm married. She'll never know. Remember what you're missing?" My hands shaking. I opened the message thread to find not just one, but 4 explicit photos Natalie had sent to my husband, along with increasingly provocative messages. The timestamps showed they had all been sent within the last hour. As the shock wore off, a cold anger replaced it. She's doing this a week before her wedding, to a man she knows is married to me after 3 years of no contact. Daniel looked as angry as I felt. "I'm so sorry. I don't even know how she got my number. I haven't changed it since before." "This isn't your fault," I said firmly. "This is Natalie doing what she's always done, trying to take what's mine, trying to hurt me." I set the phone down. "The question is, what do we do about it?" We spent the evening discussing options. Ignoring it seemed unsatisfying. Natalie would assume her messages had landed and caused pain. Responding directly to her would only engage in her toxic game. Telling my parents would be pointless. They would undoubtedly defend her actions or deny they were inappropriate. "What about her fiancé?" Daniel suggested hesitantly. "Doesn't he deserve to know what kind of person he's about to marry?" The idea gave me pause. On one hand, it felt like potential revenge, which I didn't want to indulge in. On the other hand, if I were in Richard's position, I would want to know if my future spouse was sending nude photos to another person days before our wedding. "I don't know him," I said slowly. "I have no way to contact him." "We could forward the messages to him," Daniel said. "I'm sure with his name and occupation we could find his contact information." The moral dilemma kept me awake most of the night. Was warning Richard the right thing to do, or would it just pull us back into the family drama I'd worked so hard to escape? Would it be interpreted as jealousy or spite rather than concern? In the morning, after much reflection, I made my decision. He deserves to know. If he still wants to marry her afterward, that's his choice. But he should have all the information first. Daniel found Richard's professional email through his investment firm's website. Together, we composed a brief factual message. "Richard, you don't know me, but I'm Natalie's sister. I've been estranged from my family for 3 years. Yesterday, Natalie sent these messages and photos to my husband Daniel. We felt you deserved to know before your wedding. We want no further involvement in this situation, and will not contact you again. Ramona." We attached screenshots of the messages and photos with identifying parts blurred, then hit send before I could second-guess the decision. For days, there was no response. The wedding date came and went. I checked social media sporadically but found no updates. Natalie's accounts were either private or hadn't been updated. I began to wonder if Richard had even received our email, or if he had dismissed it as the work of a jealous sister. Then one evening, a week after the wedding date, my phone rang with an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered. "Is this Ramona?" a male voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Richard, Natalie's husband." There was a heaviness to the word that told me everything. "Oh," I said, caught off guard. "I didn't expect to hear from you." "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for sending that email before the wedding." My heart raced. "You're welcome. I'm sorry if it caused you pain." "It did," he acknowledged. "But better to know than not know." He paused. I confronted Natalie. She denied it at first, then claimed it was a joke, then finally admitted she'd done it to "get back at you" for some perceived slight. Your parents backed her up completely, said you'd always been jealous of her. The familiar pattern was so predictable it almost made me laugh. That doesn't surprise me. We still got married. Richard continued, his tone resigned. But I insisted on a prenuptial agreement first. And I'm going into this with eyes open. Your sister has issues. Yes, I agreed simply. She does. Anyway, he said, I thought you deserved to know that your email made a difference. Not the difference you might have hoped for, but a difference nonetheless. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time processing this unexpected closure. Richard had made his choice, as I had made mine 3 years earlier. The difference was that he was choosing to stay despite knowing the truth, while I had chosen to leave because of it. I found myself hoping for his sake that Natalie would treat him better than she had treated me. But I also knew, with the clarity that comes from distance, that her behavior wasn't really about me at all. It never had been. Her need to compete, to take, to hurt, those were her issues, not mine. That night I checked Natalie's Instagram account and found it had been updated with wedding photos. There she was in a designer gown, smiling beside Richard. Our parents stood proudly nearby. Everyone looked happy in that carefully curated social media way, though I thought I detected a tightness around Richard's smile, a guardedness that hadn't been there in earlier photos. For the first time in years, I felt no envy, no hurt, no longing for the family in those pictures. I closed the browser window and turned instead to Daniel, curled up on the couch with a book, and Cooper at his feet. My chosen family, my real home. 1 year after Natalie's wedding, I found myself staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test in our bathroom. After 6 months of trying, we were finally pregnant. Joy surged through me, followed immediately by a complex wave of emotions about family and legacy. We're going to be parents, I whispered to Daniel that night as we lay in bed, his hand resting gently on my still flat stomach. We're going to break the cycle, he replied with quiet determination. Our child will never doubt they're loved, never be compared to siblings, never be made to feel less than. As my pregnancy progressed, I found myself thinking more about my estranged family than I had in years. Hormones, perhaps, or the natural instinct to connect generations as a new life grew inside me. Would my child inherit my mother's artistic talent, or my father's analytical mind? Would they have Natalie's natural charm without her cruelty? Most importantly, would my parents want to know their grandchild? And if they did, could I trust them not to repeat the toxic patterns with a new generation? Around my 5th month, I received a brief email from my mother. Someone had obviously informed her about my pregnancy, probably one of those well-meaning distant relatives who still moved between our separated worlds. Ramona, I heard you're expecting. Congratulations. I hope you'll reconsider your stance on family now that you're becoming a mother yourself. Children need grandparents. Let me know if you're ready to put the past behind us. Mom. No acknowledgement of the hurt they had caused. No recognition of why I had stepped away in the first place. Just the implication that motherhood would make me desperate enough for help, that I would overlook years of emotional abuse. After careful consideration and discussion with both Daniel and my therapist, I responded with clear boundaries. Thank you for the congratulations. I'm open to reconnecting, but only with acknowledgement of the family dynamics that led to our estrangement and a commitment to healthier patterns going forward. My child deserves better than what I experienced, and I need to know you understand that before I can consider allowing you into their life. Ramona. Her response came quickly and was painfully predictable. I don't know why you insist on dwelling in the past. We were good parents who did our best. Your boundaries feel like punishment. When you're ready to be reasonable, let us know. Until then, please don't contact us with these accusations. And there it was, confirmation that nothing had changed, that they were still unwilling to acknowledge their role in the family dysfunction. The decision, difficult as it was, became clear. My child would not be exposed to the same toxic patterns that had shaped my childhood. When our daughter Lily was born on a snowy January morning, she was welcomed into the world by Daniel, his parents, who had driven through a blizzard to be there, and three close friends who had become like family to us. The delivery room was filled with genuine love and support. No competition, no criticism, no passive-aggressive remarks disguised as concern. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I made a silent promise. You will always know you are enough exactly as you are. You will never have to earn love or compete for attention. You will grow up surrounded by people who see you clearly and love you completely. Daniel's parents embraced their role as Lily's only grandparents, with joy and appropriate boundaries. They visited often, but not intrusively offered help without taking over, and supported our parenting decisions without criticism. Watching Daniel's father gently rock Lily to sleep, or his mother read to her with endless patience, I sometimes felt a pang for what might have been if my own parents had been capable of such unconditional love. Occasionally, news about my family would reach me through the grapevine. Natalie's marriage was reportedly troubled already, with rumors of infidelity on both sides. My parents were still enabling her, helping her through financial difficulties caused by extravagant spending. The familiar patterns continued, only now I observed them from a distance, like watching a play I had once starred in, but had wisely exited. As Lily's first birthday approached, we planned a small celebration at our home. While addressing invitations, I paused over my family's absence, not because I wished they were included, but because I finally truly accepted that the absence of toxic people was not a loss, but a gain. The party itself was perfect in its simplicity: balloons, homemade cake, and a handful of people who genuinely cared about our little family. Lily, with frosting smeared across her beaming face, knew nothing of the complex family history that had preceded her birth. To her, this circle of love was complete and sufficient. That night, after the guests had left and Lily was asleep in her crib, Daniel and I sat on our back porch watching fireflies dance in the summer twilight. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Cutting ties with them?" I considered the question carefully. I regret that they couldn't be the family I needed. I regret that Lily won't know her other grandparents. But the decision itself, I shook my head. No, that was the first time I truly chose myself, my well-being, my future. How could I regret that? The journey from dutiful daughter to independent woman to protective mother hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, nights of tears, holidays tinged with melancholy. But looking back over the path that had led me here, I could see how each painful step had been necessary, each boundary essential. Sometimes the family we choose gives us the strength to walk away from the family we were given. And in that choice, we find not only peace, but the power to redefine what family truly means. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from toxic family members? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that choosing your own well-being isn't selfish. It's necessary for breaking unhealthy cycles. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more experiences that might help you feel less alone in your journey. Thank you for listening, and I hope you find the peace and chosen family you deserve.